When you're starting out and you're trying to figure out like what content do I make, I think the most important thing is just to be like, what do you think about? Like it really is that simple.
Because you said on your last podcast that you are the niche. I'm not niching down. I'm not trying to strike or hit a particular niche. I am the niche, man. I'm just talking about the shit that I love.
Chasing new formats every single time is kind of like the crazy inventor. Usually the crazy inventor is portrayed in movies as like a psycho with crazy hair that like never wins.
I'm looking at the economy. I'm seeing that Americans don't even have like $100 to rub together. I feel like I would love to hear a video about how in this economic landscape, our Black Friday sales breaking records left and right.
I think most people take the lazy path, which the lazy path is imitation. And they take that path because they just want to do less work. If you want to win small, you can do it with imitation. But if you want to win big, you have to push the envelope. You just have to. Like that's the only way to do it.
Golden quote, man. Somebody clip that. Yes.
All right, episode 4, weekends. Let's go. Here we go. Are you pumped?
Dude, I'm pumped. Honestly, I can't believe it's the 4th one already. I feel like, again, I'm just excited for the journey, right? Like we always talk about, it's the process. So I'm enjoying this, and I'm pumped to get into today's. We have a lot to cover and a lot of things to go through.
A lot of heat. All right. So do you want to start with either this like podcast strategy brainstorm, which I think will be really valuable for people, and a bunch of things there, or I was going to dive into, you've been crushing the last 2 weeks. You've absolutely crushed. I was looking at your videos, they killed. And I wanted to kind of ask you a few questions on that, like how you're feeling, what you've changed, why you think it's even working a step up. Which path do you want to take first?
Up to you, man. Either way.
All right, let's go with the podcast stuff because I think it's really top of mind for us. Okay, so we're starting the podcast, 3 episodes out. I think our approach was kind of like, let's just get it going, MVP it, ship it out. But I think what we're realizing is the content is gold already. Like the way to position it, and we can get into the Q&A like at the end, but some people are asking like, what is the podcast about? What is it for? In my opinion, it's like, there really isn't a show where creators are in the trenches creating, but then like zooming out and kind of like giving you a behind the scenes look at what's going on. I haven't heard any show like this. And that's kind of what this is morphed into. So I'm stoked about that. And I mean, talk about the reception you've gotten and like some of the messages you've gotten.
Yeah, I mean, it's really a creative brainstorm, and it's a podcast that I sort of wish existed, right? And so, we kind of have a problem. Let's solve our own problems. There's like a hole in the market, I guess, so to speak, for it. And like you said, what I really think is cool about it is a lot of the times we have creators who have made it and who have blown up and who are just like a fixture in creator land. And even, sometimes you can even call them like a celebrity, like a Casey Neistat. They give a lot back to the community and a lot of value in what it takes to be a creator, their path, their journey. But what I found, it usually happens at the end, like once they've succeeded, right? And so what I think is really cool is we're both, like you said, in the trenches. Like we're both amidst our journey right now, very much so. And the transparency and the candidness that presents, I think, is really important, because we're talking through our pain points, our problems, what's working, what's not, how we intend to make money, how we've made money, how we like all of these things that I think is a lot more useful to a listener during, like, in the midst of the journey. And so I think the reception has been great, and I'm with you. I think the content, I think it's a winning formula. And now it's like, how do we crack the distribution? How do we improve the packaging? How do we get more eyes and ears on this thing?
Yeah. So when I think about these podcasts, it kind of breaks into these different buckets, and that's what I want to like live brainstorm for the people. So one bucket is like the content itself, like the meat of it. So are you talking about interesting stuff? I would say like check in terms of the format, like what we're talking about, check. So the other 2 buckets that we haven't really tackled yet, because we like just getting started, but I really want to go offensive on. One is the packaging, which you talk about a lot. I feel like you're really good at this, which is for video podcasts, kind of like the thumbnail, the title, the way you roll it out. There's a lot that goes into that beyond like the thumbnail and title, kind of the intro, everything, the packaging. And then the other piece is the repurposing. So like, how do you I was talking to someone the other day, it's basically like, what you want is to increase the surface area of exposure to the ideas. So right now with this podcast, it's like, if you only tweet about the long show, you're basically creating a super narrow level on the surface, like a tiny little bit, but it's very deep. So like if you get people down the hole, it's like, holy shit, there's a lot down there. What you want is to flip it where it's like you have a lot of surface area, the exposure points that people can be exposed to, and then you can go deep anyway. So for me, that's like the repurposing. Right now, we're not really repurposing at all. We're just kind of throwing the episodes out there. So I want to talk about both of those and your ideas. Let's start with the packaging. What do you think works best for podcasts, or even take it to first principles, like content that we should start infusing into this?
Well, the first thing when I think about packaging, let's just talk first about YouTube thumbnail. So like we've been having a lot of conversations here. If somebody were to say, hey, design a YouTube thumbnail for this podcast touches on, you know, creator land, entrepreneurship, future tech, whatever it might be. It's like the first thought to most people is what's working already, right? So people are going to look to all the you know, Colin and Samir show or the MFM podcast or whatever it is. And all of the thumbnails start looking the exact same, right? Because people, this is working. Let them crunch the data, gather data. We'll just take what they find and repurpose it for ourselves. But I'm like, no, let's take risks here. You know, like like this is a different show. Let's push the envelope. And so what I'm really inspired by right now are video game thumbnails. Guys like Tim the Tapman or Dr. Disrespect and like these gamers who infuse so much personality and fun into their thumbnails. And I'm like, wait a second, nobody's done this where they're taking those kind of thumbnails and applying it to like more, you know, creator business principles or content, if you will. So what I think could be fun is like this really highly stylized illustrative style. And I got the inspiration obviously from Tim the Tapman, where Kane and I, our faces are in it, but they're like almost, it's like, and maybe they're real photography, they're real photographs, it's just stylized to look like illustrations. And like we're in these like fantastical kind of hilarious, even self-deprecating scenes. So last episode we talked about, is travel dead? Or like did the travel influencer kill the mystique of travel? So what could have been a lot of fun is like Kane and I's face like on these like goofy tourists or something, one holding like a binocular, the other one holding like a tour guide or a map. I think that could have been a lot of fun, like this super highly illustrative style. And I just think that adds like to this sort of ecosystem and world building that we're trying to do.
Yeah, I feel like that kind of cartoony animated scene based thing is way more like story, right? It's like you're getting someone interested in the story. I totally agree. So we're going to experiment with that. Try to find, if you're listening and you're like a thumbnail designer or just a animator, designer, cartoonist in general, and you want to work with us, hit us up and we'll experiment with the thumbnail piece. What do you think about the usage of like, how do you cut up? So we got like 90 minutes of, let's say you got 60, 90 minutes of gold right now. And I like what you said before about the thumbnail. The way we want to think of this is first principles. So like maybe what the convention is right. Like maybe that is what we should do, but maybe not. And so right now the convention with cutting it up is like people will take the full show. They'll take 5 to 10 minute clips and just put those on YouTube as standalone. They'll also take little 1 minute bits and cut them into shorts. But a lot of what we're seeing, and we've talked about this before, is the shorts are kind of like pretty stale, right? Like a lot of these podcast clips, as soon as you see them, you know it's a podcast clip. I scroll right away. Like I don't really watch it. So what do you think we could do and should do to repurpose? Because I think you and I both, like, we want this quality bar to be a 10. I don't want to post anything below a 10 anymore. I was thinking about a way to phrase this. I call it being prolific at altitude. So like I want us to be prolific as much quantity as we can get while staying at a certain altitude with, 33,000 feet or whatever a 10 out of 10 is. So what are some ideas running through your head about like what we could do?
Yeah, first of all, I agree with that. And like, it's funny because I think the exact same thing, but for Instagram, for whatever reason, we can get into it later. Like that is the audience that I protect the most, that I value the most, that I really put like my heart and soul into it. And then on, TikTok, Twitter, Snapchat, even like YouTube right now, just because I'm not like established there. Like I'm down to like throw shit at the wall. I don't really care, right? It's like almost like a testing ground for me. But for whatever reason, as of right now, that Instagram audience and that format is the game for me. So I'm with you. I don't want to post anything there anymore that isn't a 10 that I'm like happy with.
So what would it have to be for you to post on Instagram? That's a good filter, right? Like what would we need to produce for you to be like, I'm going on Instagram with this, like I feel good about it?
Yeah, I mean, right now, I think we've talked about it before, like Stephen Bartlett does such a good job. Even Callum Johnson, the podcast that you went on, I encourage anybody listening to go see what he's doing to kind of, it's really like, it's movie trailer style, right? It's like adopting some of the same principles from a movie trailer where you're just building hype for the long form piece of content. I think that's really cool. Like that's something that I think I'd be proud of posting. But you're right. Otherwise, like this talking the man in front of Mike thing is, I think there's a lot of audience fatigue there. And I think, we're going to look back one day and be like, man, remember that era, like 2020 to 2023, everybody just got in front of the Shure SM7B and talked. And I think that's going to go out like really, really quickly. Almost the same as like, I don't know, like 2015, how everybody was taking the same shot in front of the Iceland waterfall, whatever. There's swings. So what are my ideas? I don't know. I want to actually pose that back to you because it's more difficult than people think to crack, right? And it takes a lot of experimentation. So what are you thinking there?
Well, I definitely want us to do the joint shorts and like do like 2 of those a week if we can. Now that's not really repurposing podcast content. So we'll get to that in a second. But I think my thought is, and this is like frustrating that this is the solution that I'm coming to, is the best way to get people actually authentically interested in what you're doing is to make native content on the platform you're posting. So like taking a horizontal long form podcast designed for YouTube and just cutting it, stacking the people and putting on Instagram, that's not native, right? That's like copy pasting lazily to Instagram. That's why it doesn't work. So like what works natively on Instagram is kind of like what we already do. Like you and I post shorts on Instagram that go crazy every single day. So that's that's closer to like the native. So the joint shorts is really cool because we invented a format on our own. We talked about that on a previous podcast. We're going to do a lot more of that. Like I think we should at least do 1 a week, if not more. But that's like separate, right? That'll help drive people like, oh, these guys are working together. What else are they doing together? Oh, the podcast. They'll start running down the rabbit hole. That's helpful. But when it comes to like repurposing the pod content, my thought was, imagine you have an iceberg and like 10% above the water, 90% below. The 90% below is like the clips from us actually having the podcast, but cut up and styled and used with B-roll in like an artsy way, like a little bit better than just throwing it up. But the 10% above the water, to me, that's like the hook on Instagram, like the first 5 seconds. That has to be native. So like it's frustrating, but I was thinking if we figured out what the best moments were from the podcast, we kind of came up with like what the storyline was. And then after the fact, you and I just banged out like 2 or 3 intros each and sent those over to the editor that were like, natively recorded vertically for setting up that clip. That's one way that I feel like you get closer to the native form for Instagram, TikTok, whatever. But even that is still not pure native because 90% of it is still the kind of like stacked, podcast clip format. So I don't know, that it feels like tough because a lot of the content we make that goes well, that's native short form, it's fast paced, it's scripted, there's not a lot of fluff versus these conversations are just like free flowing, So does that pop any ideas?
Yeah, I mean, a couple things there. One is, it's still to me now, like not super compelling, right? Because it's like, okay, I can do the highly stylized intro and then come up with the podcast content. It's like, or I can like re-record it in higher quality specifically for that platform. And then hopefully in the caption, maybe drive some intrigue, curiosity, eyeballs to the podcast, right? So there's still like this push-pull there. I don't know exactly what's right. I do think you're right. I think it's like we got to lean heavily into YouTube. And how I think that would work is YouTube Shorts has this really cool thing now where you can link the long-form video to it. So I think we got to go really, really heavy into YouTube Shorts because you're right. Even like Steven, I would argue that I don't know how much, and he's like the best of the best at funneling people from a short form into long form. I still don't know how much that'll work or convert, if that makes sense, right? I just don't think like cross-platform conversion is very, very tricky. If you're trying to grow your TikTok with your Instagram, or if you're trying to grow your YouTube with your TikTok, or your Snapchat with your Twitter, whatever it may be, it's half impossible, right? And so it has to be done on, like you said, like native to the platform. So I think we go really, really heavy into YouTube Shorts and then use the link to bring eyeballs into the long form. And go heavy into YouTube long form, but shorter clips that pertain to something really, really, really relevant with a lot of search volume. So I think we almost have to be strategic here where, okay, let's make sure in every podcast to hit like 2 or 3 really highly trending topics, maybe even debate them, be a little controversial, whatever it may be, maybe strategic around there, and then go heavy into these shorter clips. And I think eventually what'll happen is we'll have 1 or 2 that'll like really trigger the algorithm, ride the wave. And from there, it becomes a volume game, keep hammering that home. And I think it'll just continue to compound like really quickly after that.
And so when you say YouTube Shorts, you mean like more like the traditional podcast style, but like because it's YouTube Shorts or TikTok, as long as we like protect Instagram, like we don't post anything on Instagram besides the joint shorts that are native, that are basically like view Instagram as HBO, right? It's like high quality content, and then view TikTok, YouTube Shorts, I mean Snapchat, whatever, but like let's say TikTok and YouTube Shorts as it's okay to be more high quantity. I don't want to say low quality, but like high quantity, unoriginal format, because we're like playing the algorithm for the shorts. Is that what you're thinking?
Well, I think, Instagram is really cool because it's such it's a very like diverse platform, right? So it's like, I just want to protect the feed. I think the feed almost in a way is like your body of work. It's like an artist's HQ, almost like resume. But there's stories, there are broadcast channels, there's now threads, there's captions, there's ways that you can play it. Like, for example, if you have I almost think this may even work better than making a post about the podcast. But say you just make one of your viral videos that get 10 million views, whatever it is, right? And then in the comment, you pin a comment, or you pin your comment. It's like, I go really deep into this on the podcast. I think I think that'll probably be more effective in converting than just making a piece of content on, you see what I mean? So it's there's a lot of ways to drive traffic on Instagram that's not like abusing the feed, if that makes sense.
And one thing that I'm sure is coming to people's mind as they're listening to this is, so you're 100% right that like even in the Instagram ecosystem alone, there's 5 different modalities, right? Like you said, broadcast, whatever. So, but it can be overwhelming to be like, what do I do, right? Because the key that we need to figure out is, and we luckily have some traction, and hopefully we'll like have more resources coming in because of that traction, that we can afford to like outsource this, but like, who does it, right? Because I think from your and my perspective, like we've got so much going on, we're split. It's like a Horcrux in Harry Potter. Like we're split so many times that it's hard to be effective. It's hard to stay up to date on threads and like post in the broadcast channel and do stories 3 times a day and post, like it's hard to do that. And so where do you think is the 80-20, and or like what is the team structure that we should do? Is it just one person we hire that's kind of like the podcast COO that owns all of it, and like that's their job full time? Like, what do you think? What's your current thoughts on that?
I think that's right. There's 2 thoughts that come to mind. I want to get your take on it. One is like our effort so we're getting the most signal in the content that we're already making, right? We're getting a lot of signal. We're getting a lot of positive feedback. Does it make sense to now shift a lot of that time, energy, resources to this podcast where there's like less signal, but a lot of potential, away from something that's already working? I think that's a mistake a lot of creators make. I don't know. So my thing is like, I think we need to hire a killer to a great operator to play inside baseball here, where it's like, we know the potential behind this pod. We think it could be massive. But I don't think we want to sacrifice some of the energy that we have on the things that are working towards this, where so I guess what I'm trying to say is like somebody who's like leads the entire content strategy. So not only are they, editing the pod, killing it with the thumbnails, the packaging, etc., but now they've figured out the distribution component of it, where again, I think this is highly effective for anybody listening. I think it would be really effective for us. If you want, wait, we'll try it and we'll report back the data. But these Instagram pages are golden. So we go to all these pages covering business, creativity, technology, whatever it is, and we have them repost our content. And it's actually very, very, very cheap to do. It's just time consuming, developing all these relationships, going back and forth, and coordinating. But if we had somebody who could do that, who could take our pod clips, and instead of us posting them on our page, which we can as well, we have them posted across like 30 different Instagram pages with the carousel packaging, where the first thing is, like viral creator discusses how to go viral or whatever, right? And then you swipe, and then it's Kallaway like going through like his storytelling framework. Boom, that's a strategy. So having somebody that can coordinate and just like oversee that entire operation, I think that's the move.
Yeah, and that's one strategy. Another one you mentioned we were texting is like the Andrew Tate strategy, where again, this person goes to younger creators, gives them a library of all of our clips. Those people make them, they get paid out for views. So it's kind of like, in my head, there's like the hard work, which is us posting on our own channels, and there's the smart work, which is like using some of these more innovative strategies. A combination of hard and smart, I feel like works perfectly. And what we need is the killer who can like dedicate their bandwidth. And it's not that like for people listening, it's not that we don't want to, like we could easily do this, right? It's just a matter of like putting your head down and doing it. It all comes down to leverage, which is what I'm realizing. When you have no audience, you're like, I'll do anything. All I want is for it to work. But once it's working, you're doing a disservice to yourself if you're running away from leverage. So like for us, the highest leverage moves are spend 2 hours making one piece that gets 10 million views and brings thousands of people into the ecosystem. That's way higher leverage than like us sending emails to Instagram pages to like coordinate this. And so for someone who doesn't have a front facing channel and doesn't maybe have access to leverage, this is an amazing opportunity for like a young, scrappy hustler to come and like basically be the brains behind our operation, which I think if I was 22 and interested in media, there is no more interesting role than that, I feel like. So that's my sales
man. And we also have like a lot, I think, that we could bring to the table as well. And I think it would be, I mean, what you say is so right? Like the only reason anybody would probably be listening to this is because of the work that we've put into the mediums that are working for us. And people trust us or they like the work that we put out. They like to hear our opinions on things. And so running away from that, I don't know if it's the right move. And I actually see this so much, man, even in like my own circle. One of the biggest mistakes I see that creators make is, so for example, say you start putting out content and it's working and it's resonating and people like it, and they like you and they develop affinity towards you and they begin to trust you and you're developing these relationships. And then all of a sudden you're at 200,000, 250,000, whatever it might be, followers. And it's like, yo, this is working. Oh, wait a second. I'm a big creator now. Hold on. I got to go figure out how to monetize. I'm going to create this. I'm going to go do this. I'm going to go speak at this event. I'm going to go here, blah, blah, blah. And then all of a sudden you're doing everything except for what opened up all those opportunities. You're working on everything except for the opportunity engine that created all of this for you. And so like, and by the way, I understand how difficult it is to have the patience and the trust in yourself to continue doing what it is and just keep compounding. And I do think that's why it's like, I love the quote where the more no's, or like the bigger the no, or the more the no's, the more impactful the yeses down the line. You have such a way with words, you can probably like consolidate that so much more poetically. But you see what I mean there? Like, is that making sense?
100%. And I think like to play devil's advocate for those people listening, there's two reasons why they do this. One makes sense and one doesn't. The one that makes sense is like, you desperately want to be a creator. You have no resources. Like you have no family money. You have no money saved. You didn't work a job. You're young, right? And so those people, like, I think this is the wrong strategy, but this is what they do. They get started. They get a little bit of traction, like 50,000 followers, or it doesn't have to be followers as the metric, but like, let's just say, and they start taking like dumb brand deals to get a couple $1,000s here and there because they have to pay their bills. So it's like, I get that. And if you didn't take those deals and you couldn't pay your bills and you had to then go work a job, which took you away from creating, that is probably worse, right? So like, I get that, but that's not the bucket we're talking about. Because if that's you and you're jumping without the savings or whatever, you're going to find a way. You're going to be scrappy enough because you had that mindset before you made it. The other bucket is what I think is more egregious, which is basically like, you have resources, you have runway, you have bandwidth, but you stupidly follow $3,000 checks because because it's like new and fun and like shiny. And that's the huge mistake, right? And like, you've taken almost no brand deals. I've done like a handful just to test out how it would be like. And guess what? Spoiler alert, they suck. Like, it sucks to do it. It's so much work. It's nice when the check comes in, but like, you basically take yourself out of the creative mode for sometimes 3 days at a time.
You're going back to the 9 to 5 kind of.
Yeah, exactly.
Like work for somebody else. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It's 9 to 5, except like you can't hide at lunch and not do anything. Like you have to actually do the work. So yeah, I mean, to your point, is like, it's what we were talking about before on that previous episode around the trust coins. Like, you just got to keep charging up, keep depositing the trust coins, not spending them, not trying to monetize. So, but I will say, like, on the flip side of that, we want to find a way to automate, and the only way to automate is to pay people to take stuff off your plate. And the only way to pay people to take stuff off your plate is to make some kind of money somewhere. I just think most people don't align them. Like, what we're saying is, what's working is us making content. So how can we find a way to monetize us making content so we can keep doing what works, but also get enough money 100%. In to automate? That's a good way to frame it, I think.
Thank you for saying that, because I am coming from like a very privileged standpoint. Like, I sold my last company. I still have like a little bit of runway where I can continue to like sacrifice in the short term for hopefully a more lucrative long term. I also have like still some income coming in from the projects that I have out there, whatever. So like I can do that. So you're right. Like, if somebody has to put food on the table, get the rent paid 100%. So I'm not saying, and I'm also not saying, even if you're in a more privileged position or a more advantageous position, I'm also not saying to not take the brand deals, because the ones piling up on my inbox are like, all right, I'm going to do a couple of these, right? But I guess what I'm trying to say is if you have like this velocity and what you're doing is working, don't wean away from that. Don't run away from that chasing these shiny objects. Because again, like all these opportunities that are being created because of your content and the work that you're putting in, and that'll continue to compound over time. And so, like you said, continue collecting these trust coins and wait to cash them in, and do it really thoughtfully and really appropriately to your brand.
Yeah, it's funny. Like when it comes to money, most people would think, okay, yeah, I want to save my money for later because I want to buy something bigger later. It's the same exact philosophy, you know. So, okay, to put a summary on this kind of segment around what do we do with the YouTube packaging. So basically, and play back, if I miss something, play it back. But basically, we want to change the thumbnail structure so that it's more like animated, sceney, like putting us in these like fantastical, you know, things related to the episode, but like more interesting and story based. And then on the packaging front, we want to lean heavy into YouTube clips, 5 to 10 minute clips that we can basically connect to either YouTube Shorts or like the full episode. And we want to experiment with some of these like pod style clips at an elevated quality on everywhere except Instagram, unless they're like good enough. But like, let's just say we want to protect the Instagram audience at all costs. We're going to do the joint shorts, which are more native Instagram, and like see how that goes. But I would say like we still have an open question about like how best do we repurpose this content? Because at the end of the day, like we're not talking about news segments. Like it doesn't cut as clean as like, oh, here's a 5-second reaction to, or 5-minute reaction to OpenAI. We'll do that occasionally, but I think the real gold is in this dialogue. So it's like, this is a new type of format, and we need to create like a new type of bridge over to these other platforms. So I guess it's still like TBD, I'd say. Is that a fair summary?
Good summary. And if anybody has any ideas, man, we're always open to feedback, or any ideas that you may have. I think we value those a lot. So feel free to comment, DM, whatever it may be.
Yeah, and if you're that killer for the COO role, we're not going to rush to make the hire, but like we're ready to get somebody in and like really take this on. So hit us up, like email us both, or comment anywhere you can reach us. Like hit us up, and we'll take it seriously.
100%, man. It just needs to be somebody very, very hungry who intimately understands social, different platforms, their culture, what works, what doesn't, how to resonate, communicate with an audience, and hopefully you've done it in some way, shape, or form, either through a TikTok page, faceless YouTube, whatever it may be. Some sort of social proof that you can do it.
Yeah, hell yeah. All right, I want to transition to this. So last 2 weeks, I was basically off the grid, like effectively zero traction. But you crushed the last 2 weeks. So I was looking at your Instagram, which I think is like the most realistic read on like how the content's resonating. I think TikTok is like a crapshoot, to be honest. So I was looking at the Instagram. Your last 6 videos absolutely killed it. And I want to know a few things. The first is, do you feel happy / like good with where it has trended in the last couple weeks? Or do you still feel like you're making content that isn't in a format that excites you, but like it happened to work because you know it works? What's your feeling?
I'm never too excited about the performance, nor am I too despondent about the valleys. So I'm sort of indifferent throughout the peaks and the valleys. Again, I love this process. I have a long-term vision. And so it's nice. I do think like the algorithm is an honest critic, like I said, on Instagram especially, right? YouTube, TikTok, et cetera, is more of a crapshoot. But I agree with you that Instagram's algorithm is the most honest critic. So it's nice when you get that feedback. Again, like some of the videos I was making, like these AI tool videos, I made one that did 1.6 million on Instagram, like 80,000, 70,000 likes. I covered the OpenAI saga, which I actually really, really enjoyed doing, but it's still nothing that I'm like overly proud about. Those did really well, but okay. But the last video that I made, I don't know, there may be another video when you're listening to this, but the Great Online Game one, I was very, very proud of, because that's the kind of content that I love to make, that I want to make, that is a creative challenge that excites me. That it's just like, that's a great representation of who I am and what I want to do, and like the creative endeavors that I want to undertake. And so that, I was really happy that resonated, because I spent a lot of time and I put a lot of love into that video. And honestly, it's a culmination of like 10 years of experiences and skills being gathered, etc. And so I was happy that resonated, because I was perfectly prepared for that one to do like, 40, 50K views, which I actually thought it would. But I guess the message was strong and the hook was well edited and all that, blah, blah, blah. So I understand why it performed. But that one I was really proud of. The rest, I don't like, I might make a video tonight about like where AI video is, and it might do well, and I'm not proud. I don't really care. It's just like, that's a service that I'm doing to the audience. But these short form, like more cinematic movies where I'm like really exploring a more, like a bigger idea, or maybe being more vulnerable and like really putting my heart and soul into it, that I love. And so, yeah, I guess to summarize, I don't care about the views. Sometimes I'm in a valley and the views are kind of low and nothing's really working. And sometimes like things are just popping off. I don't really care either way. I just, when something that I really, really love does well, I get satisfaction from that.
Yeah, dude, that last video you made was sick. I think that was the best video I've ever seen from you. And
thank you, man.
Both because the quality of like the editing and storytelling, but also just like the idea was, the format was original, the idea was fresh.
That's what I'm most proud about.
Yeah, it's sick.
I was trying to, how do I present this in a way nobody's ever done, kind of thing. And like, that's now like a challenge that I take seriously. And like, I know you and I always talk about this, like what kind of formats can we crack? Like, how do we present ideas that are really compelling that haven't been done before? I like, as a creative challenge, bro, that gets me going, man. Like that gets me so excited to see if I can continue to do that.
So a few thoughts on that, a few questions on that. So the original formats thing, I think, is where the gold is. So like,
and you wrote this about it on your last newsletter, dude. I want you to present this, but I don't know if you were going there or not. We can get there after, if not.
Yeah. Well, you want to talk about like the transpositioning piece, or just like the fact that original format, I mean, I guess both. Original formats is like in the internet, the power law is true, right? Like 80-20, like 80% of the views, money, whatever accrues to the top 20%. And if you look at who is big, like real big, a lot of those people pioneered a format, or there was maybe like people on the bleeding edge that created a format, but like it wasn't big. And then that person took it and ran with it. And a few thoughts, like you and I have done a pretty good job of stacking up some original formats. Like the way me and you are the only ones that kind of do this like split screen news style. And I think we came upon that like around the same time, to be honest. The Joints collaborative storytelling is a completely new format. I would say this kind of like I don't even know how you frame what you just made, but like this kind of like storytelling heavy kind of like, I need to come up with like a term for it, but like that's a brand new format. The way I write the blueprint, I feel like is a new format. So like we're coming up with a lot of these like fresh formats. And I think when you stack fresh formats, you become known for different things. The question though is like, chasing new formats every single time is kind of like the, crazy inventor that's like always chasing a new patent. Usually the crazy inventor is portrayed in movies as like a psycho with crazy hair that like never wins. And so, versus someone who takes the inventor's stuff and then commercializes it. So I wonder how you think about like, how much do you spend kind of experimenting with these new formats? And then when you find one that works, like just doubling down and be like, okay, I want to rinse and repeat that 100 times. Cause like, that's really cool. How are you thinking about that?
I'm not really thinking a lot, actually. I'm kind of just going with like my creative instinct and gut. So like this, the way that this last piece came about, I was actually in conversation with my wife, and I said, we were talking about, cause she may make a return back into content as well. She's just so busy with the baby and her career, her job, whatever. But I'm like, I've been trying to get her back into content cause she's really good. And so I'm like, you just need a kind of a strategy. Like, are you going to be into content just for pure creative expression? Or is this like something that could maybe, be some sort of a side hustle that could turn into a full-time job, that could turn into, like something larger down the road. So we were talking about this, and I'm like, you can just play the game. Like, and a lot of it was inspired by our last podcast where you said the game is the game. And I talked about how the journey was more important than anything else. And so in conversation with her, I was like, you can just kind of play it like a game. Like sometimes I see this as an RPG, and like as an RPG player growing up, it just made a lot of sense to me. And then she's like, yeah, but that's not fulfilling. And so in conversation with her, we came to this conclusion is like life is really about serving. Like the quality of your life is in the quality of your relationships. The quality of your relationships is in your service to others. And so like, again, like in conversation to her, I just came up with like this script in my head, and I started editing it before I recorded the dialogue part. And I don't know, man, it all just like pieced together in my head as like, it wasn't planned. It all happened within a span of 18 hours, and the whole video from ideation to deployment was done. So to answer your question, I don't know. I wasn't doing a lot of thinking, which is a terrible answer.
Let's say you think of it like, let's call those like Roberto originals, let's say. So like that's a category of content. And then like the split screen, you know, it doesn't have to be news, but like the split screen is a category. The joints is a category. Like, how do you think about, okay, because it took you 18 hours. So you could crank out 3 of those a week and like go 40 hours a week and do like three originals and just keep peppering originals. Or you could do a mix, or you could never do originals again. Like there's a lot of, because I think part of the way I think and the way you think too is kind of just like whatever comes to us that day, let it rip. And that's one way to think about it. But I think a lot of people who don't have that instinct yet are kind of more in the what do I do mode. And if you're lucky enough to come up with unique formats that like work for you, you know, do you just hammer those and not explore? Like, I think there's an interesting, I don't even know if there's a right answer. Right now I'm kind of riding the, like, whatever I'm interested in that day, I kind of revert back to this split screen just because it's like easy and consistent, but I want to push the envelope. Like I want to do new shit. It just takes a lot more time, and then I can't hit these like arbitrary quantity thresholds.
And well, let me get this thought out, then I want to ask you about that, because you said something, or maybe it was Callum on the podcast you did with Callum, where it's like the bigger you are, the harder it is to experiment. Whereas when you're small, it's like that's actually like the best time to be a creator, because you can try a ton of different things, see what works, and then like hammer home. You also made a brilliant analogy about the gold sifter in the sand or whatever. I want to let you like explain all that. But the thought that I have is this: I actually got a lot of signal from this video, where I think that video did more. Like, let's just from a strategic, personal branding point of view, I think that did more for me as like an artist, as a creator, than all of my videos previously combined. Like I just really do. And so those 12 hours, I think, were much more impactful because it took me 12 hours of actual work to create the video. Those 12 hours, I think, were probably more impactful than like the hundreds, if not 1,000 hours before that. And so it gave me kind of like a more clear path moving forward, where I'm like, if I just put out one of these a month, I think it would be more impactful to me than putting out 30 videos a month talking about whatever. And I don't think I'm going to do that. Like, I think my next video is just going to go back to like my split screen format covering something, whatever. It's like the most first world problem of all time, but I don't know if you've been thinking about this as well.
Well, isn't that funny how like you make something that gets the highest signal ratio you've gotten probably ever, and then your default is like, let's go back to safety. Like, isn't that hilarious that that's how it works?
It's tough because it's like, am I doing a disservice now to the audience? So like, wait a second, you're following this up with like some AI tool? Like what is this? You know, I don't know, you know? And
I think like I battle with this every day. Like a good example is like today I was either going to make like probably a throwaway video on Pika Labs and be like, oh, I'm sure that's what you're going to do too. Like, oh, this AI video tool's cool. And like the trailer came out. Or I was going to be like, I was going to make one of those like business breakdowns around like Amazon's Black Friday game and like some like deeper, like much deeper, right? Much closer to like the stuff that I've made that's popped up before. And part of my process is like, how much time do I have, which is really annoying because I'm trying to hit these arbitrary thresholds. Correct. And then that biases me. But even if time wasn't a constraint, I think what we need to do is zoom back out and be like why are we doing this in terms of like trying to be an artist, but like business strategy wise, like what moves are going to make the best sense business strategy wise, and then you try to layer over like the art. Because I think if you go I guess you could go full art, but you and I have so many plans and like things we want to do, and like I feel like you got to have the business layer. So for I guess like to live work it out, ultimately what we want, I guess, from the media side is we just want as many people as possible to be in the ecosystem who can like learn and hear from us, right? I think that's the most important thing. And you just want to build trust with as many people as possible. And so that usually leads to like, I want reach. And then reach means I got to do the formats that are going to get me the most reach. Now it's tough for you because you just got reach with the new format and you get reach with the old one. So it's like, you know, I don't know how many views the new video is at, but let's say it's like 700K. Is 700K reach significantly different than like 1.6 million of a split screen? Probably not. You're probably getting the same ish conversion into the funnel, right? So it's like there's not a lot of drop off there, but reach is one variable. And then, like you said, depth and appreciation for you as an artist, like, is another. So you probably got way more followers because people are like, wow, he's cool as an artist, versus the other stuff. You got way more followers for people like, oh, he's good with news and like, I want to follow him for news. So it's like, what purpose do you want to be known for? And I think all of these variables are at play and like in our heads every day. That's why it's so difficult, is like, it's
Dude,
tough.
This is literally, I think, the central underlying theme for this podcast: the artist versus the business person. This is when it comes to like my time and existence and like experience as a creator, this is like the central theme that's always running through my head. It's like, do I want to? Yeah, man, because you're right. I could continue hammering this format. And the reason that I thought in my head, let me go back to the old format, is because it's a lot more monetizable. So I could create these and I don't know, maybe get a lot of followers and love and like creating like these cinematic pieces, but it's like it's a starving artist, you know, in a way. It's like pure artistry, where it's like, no, wait a second, we have to have like a business component to what we're doing. And like, I think this is why this podcast is interesting, because we're both like, both sides of our brains are like always so highly active. The right side and the left side, the creator side and the business side. And like kind of like reconciling that is a really tough game. I come to find out.
Well, I think I always think this, like, you can't outrun your nature. I like say this over and over, and like our nature is to be both. Like if we were truly 100% artist, we'd have, you know, exposed brick walls and like sleeves of tattoos and then from that sense it's like, okay, I'm willing to make nothing and like just make art. But I feel like our nature is both, and so because of that, to shut out the business side is going against your nature, which feels like a dissonance. So, I mean, another way I think about this, and is probably a harder problem for me than you, because I think your skills as a video creator are better than mine. And so it makes it even harder for you, because you're like, I have this crazy art vision that you could execute. For me, it's like, I think about this thing called the artist gap. I don't know if you've ever seen me talk about this, but it's basically like the artist gap is the difference between taste and your skills today. So like my taste for like what I want to make in my head is really high, but my hands can only make, let's say, like a 3 out of 10 today. Like I just don't have the reps. I would say your skills are higher than mine. Let's say 6 or 7 out of 10. Like you still have some to go, but like you're pretty good, as evidenced by that last video. So for me, because the delta is so much higher between taste and skills, I often retreat to safety in the business format because I can't execute the art I want. Now, if I had 10 out of 10 skills and then I had 10 out of 10 taste where I could like actually execute what I want, then it becomes much more challenging, because it's like, oh shit, I could actually make this art today, or I could do something that's going to bring me 50 grand. For me, it's like, I can't execute the art I want. So do I put out a piece that I'm like internally not happy with because I can't get my skills there yet, you know, or do I retreat? So that's the thing I'm always struggling with, is like every time you make a piece, if you push yourself, you get closer and closer to closing that gap. But the world I'm in right now is like, I'm trying to churn out so much content. I don't really think I'm improving that much video to video. Like I'm not introducing new skills every time, because the time to create the video is so short. Like I only give myself 3-4 hours. So it's like, I can only try out one new thing, you know? So that's something I struggle with. I don't know if you feel like you're at a place where you can execute whatever art vision you have, you could execute given enough time, or there's still skills where you like don't do it because you don't know how to do it yet.
No, I mean 100%. Like for what I'm doing, I mean it all depends, right? Because mine is not like purely editing. Like a lot of it is now like lighting. I'm studying like lighting techniques and like how to light dialogue scenes and how like different, like how light tells a story in itself. Like I'm really inspired again by cinematographers. Roger Deakins, I think one of like the coolest humans walking the world. But I'm not going to be a cinematographer. I'm not going to be a movie director. I'm not, you know. So it's like, how do I combine like all of my different skill sets, and like what is the best art that I can make with that? But again, I think like all things, like all great things, there's a balance to be that you have to strike. And so I'm thinking now, it's like, okay, I could do like one original a month, and the rest is like content, you know, as normal that have also been working, that also people like and appreciate. And Yeah, man. I mean, that's kind of how real quick before I forget this thought too. I'm thinking like you were talking about videos maybe to make today. I would love to see a video from you. I don't know if this like strikes a chord or sparks an idea, but like you're talking about Amazon's Black Friday strategy. But like I'm looking at the economy. I'm seeing that Americans don't even have like $100 to rub together. I think like 60% of Americans don't have like $1,000 in emergency cash. And like all these economic indicators, it's like we're in kind of dire times. How is Black Friday sales through the roof? Like so like I would love to hear a video about how in this economic landscape are Black Friday sales breaking records left and right, and why like these ingenious capitalist strategies and like storytelling by marketers are leading to. I don't know if that's like that was in your thought process, but I just wanted to get that idea out there in case that like that would be a really valuable video, and I think
that's a good idea.
Provoke a lot of curiosity.
I gotta sit on that and think like what the angle is, but that would be a dope idea. There's a lot there. And that's another question is like, okay, I've been making tech stuff, but then I infuse the business stuff is like, what actually works? Like, why are people actually following me? I have no idea. Like what do I like to make? What do they want to see? Like, there's just this constant push pull around
Let me ask you this, because you said on your last podcast that you are the niche. I thought this was really cool. It's like, I'm not niching down. I'm not trying to strike or hit a particular niche. I am the niche, man. I'm just talking about the shit that I love. Cult brands. You're talking about tech. You're talking about future tech. You're talking about creator land. Like you are the niche. And so I wanted to ask you about that. Is that a recent mantra mindset that you've adopted? Has that been your sort of like guiding principle since the beginning? And is that something that you'd recommend to a brand new creator versus hyper niching down?
Yeah. That has been the mindset. Like the very first little like idiom that I thought about was like, N=1, right? So like the only way to be different is to lean all the way 100% into like your authentic interests. That's the only way. You can copy someone else's style and interests for a while, but at the end of the day, even if that worked, you're going to get to a point where like you feel empty and phony because the thoughts you have don't align with like the output you're putting out. For me is like, if you listen to this podcast and you watch my shit, like this is actually how I think all day. Like I walk around and I'm like, oh shit, like I wonder how that works. And like, it is perfectly aligned. So that's why I don't really feel burnout. I don't feel fatigue because this is actually how I think. The fatigue comes from like the editing of the videos because that's the thing I don't know. But like the content, I could talk about this all day. So I do think if you're starting out, the most important thing is to lean all the way into. If you drew a Venn diagram of like 10 circles overlapping, every single person is going to be unique. Everyone. Like, you know, there's common archetypes. Like you might like tech and streetwear and sneakers and sports, right? That's like a common one. But there's little things in there that like you like added onto those that other people don't. So when you're starting out and you're trying to figure out like what content do I make, I think the most important thing is just to be like, what do you think about? Like it really is that simple. Like when you go with your friends and you talk to them, what do you talk about? And whatever that is, start making content on that. I think putting the lens of like, well, what could I sell? What would brands pay me for? I just think that's so far down the line that people get too caught up in that, and then they end up being inauthentic.
I love that, man. I think any single person basically on earth can take what they already know and love, the experiences that they've already have, package that up into content, and I think they'll, again, like I'm just talking about like 98, of course there's outliers. I think that most people can actually surpass their current salaries doing that, you know, over, let's say in a 2, 3, 4 year period, and be a lot happier with a lot more time freedom. And so like, I think that's the right strategy. And then I wanted to ask you about editing. You keep going back to like editing and it seems like you feel like you're hampered by it, but I'd ask you like that style, so say you had a magic wand and you became the best editor on planet Earth. Like what else could you add though without it being like, okay, I guess you could add like some crazy 3D effects, but I think that'd be distracting and not additive to the story. I think like your presentation format, it's like you've already kind of almost like reached the pinnacle, right? Like what do you think, what skills do you not have that you think are holding you back? Because I don't think there's much more to add to it that would be additive and not distracting, if that made sense.
Yeah, I mean, that's a fair point. I think one of the things I just want to be faster. Well, like I am at peak speed for what I can do, but like I would love to be like this is an idea I had, which is like this kind of over the shoulder audit. Like what I would love is for a real professional video editor to watch me make a video end to end with no cuts and be like, yo, you should change these 4 things and you'll save 30 minutes. Like, so speed is one. The other is just like, I feel like a carpenter without all the tools. Like, I don't know what other tool there is that I'm missing. And maybe you're right. Like, I wouldn't use any of those extra tools, but it would be helpful to know like just more things to grab, you know, like in your latest video, I feel like you used a lot of techniques that I have no clue how to execute. So for example, like when you zoom all the way into the screen and it's like tilted and you're like going down it, I have no idea how to do that. That's a cool little thing to add to help like enforce the story. And I feel like there's a few things like that where, yeah, I guess if I really wanted to, I could just learn on YouTube and like I'd Google it. So it's more just a crutch probably of me saying that I don't know how to edit. But I'm on the flip side, the defect could be actually a positive, right? So like ignorance is bliss. I can only use the tools I have, which means I have to rely more on the storytelling, which is why my storytelling got better. So that's, you know, that's another piece to it. I think, yeah, I feel like it's a lot of grass is greener mentality, you know, like you try to look at things, you see things that you don't know how to do and you think there's some secret of like, you know, what you can't do. So, but yeah, I think it's a combination of those things.
Yeah. Cause I see editing as like, it needs to add to the story. And so, yeah, because I see a lot of pieces now that are like overemphasize the editing and lean so heavily into the editing. And I find it like distracting and actually a little bit distasteful now. Like it's almost not so desirable anymore. And I see a lot of this. So like, I just feel like when I come to editing, it's like, okay, what editing technique can I employ to help tell the story better, to help evoke a particular emotion, to help emphasize a point that I'm trying to get across? And so I don't know, man, when I look at your editing, I feel like it's actually great. Like I don't see where like other technique, maybe, okay, you got a new camera, maybe you're going to do a new background, whatever, but this is like more stylistic choices. Yeah. I don't, you know, like I can't imagine, like, I don't think you need like crazy 3D effects and shit like that. I think it'll almost be distracting because it's like the story is paramount. When I look at content nowadays, I think, and same goes really for movies or video games, the story is paramount, like the gameplay, right? Or in a movie, it's the story, how it's being told, how it's being presented. And then second in content, I think is like personality, how you can deliver certain things. And then third, I think at the very bottom is production quality and editing. So I think if you're not a good story, so sorry, like my brain's going a million different places, but there's a lot of dope artists on Instagram who are just like pure, look at this visual technique, it's awesome, but there's no story. And so like I see these and they're very bland and empty to me because it's just like really pretty visuals, but there's nothing going on. You know, it's just like, you know, like a girl spinning in slow motion with like the Grand Tetons behind her. And I'm like, this is, and so I think editing and shit is only important if you don't have story or personality. I think you have those both. So I wouldn't, again, just, you know, some random thoughts coming to mind, but I wouldn't put too much emphasis on that.
A way too to think about it is like the master craftsman uses less techniques. So it's almost like I don't want to learn more so I can add more. I want to learn more so I can take stuff away and still tell the story better. You know what I'm saying?
Love that.
Basically I'm adding on everything I know and I'm like, oh, I could do that here and add this and add this. But really like the expert editor, like you're saying, does almost nothing. But because they know the one thing that moves the needle 90%, they're able to do it. Versus like, maybe I know it and I just don't know what I don't know, but that's kind of how I was thinking about it. I agree, like stacking on the effects, it makes it way too busy. And I was going to ask you, a good like brainstorm thing would be if you look at my stuff holistically, let's just take like Instagram, for example, like what if you were me, what would you do to basically go the next level? So I don't even know what the next level looks like, but whatever, you know, everybody can keep going. You're never like there. So what do you think would be the biggest needle movers for my stuff?
That's an interesting question because it's hard to answer. It's something that I always ask myself and I can't answer it like for myself either. Maybe it's a little bit easier outside looking in. And so I think it's a great question to ask. And I want to ask the same to you. Dude, I really don't know. Like your stuff is just like, you are probably the best in, first of all, you made this point in a previous podcast, but like there is a real need for people who are able to take complex issues and subjects and distill them down into a very explain it like I'm five, a very easy to digest format. I think you're one of the best at that, honestly. And so, and you also said like if somebody, I don't want to paraphrase, I don't want to butcher your quote, but you were like, if somebody asked an audience member of mine like what they like about me, I don't want to paraphrase, but Callum I think asked you this question. Do you remember what you said? Again, I don't want to butcher, but it was something like he has like great taste and I trust him to like let me know what's going on and keep me updated, something like that. And so like if that's your objective, bro, I don't know what else you can do. Honestly, like your storytelling, like I said, the way you deliver your cadence, it's melodic, it's like it's poetic, it's like you just have like this way with words. I think it's super dope. And so if that's your objective, and in a good way, I have trouble like thinking of things that could take that to the next level, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate that. I feel like the stack you said.
My bad. I want to make this point too. Like, what would please me, but this is very situational to me, is like I love, dude, like again, like cinematography is like one of my favorite art forms in the world. So like once you have that FX3 going, and like maybe your lighting is a little more like structured and there's more depth and like that would please me. I don't think that would please 98% of the audience, but if you're asking me personally, I may say something like that. Like I'm excited to see what you do with that FX3.
And that's where I was going with it. Like that, I like that stack you had of like the most important thing is personality, then story, then production. So it's like I feel decent about where the personality and the story is, but like my production can go up. So like that's where that's what I was thinking in my head of like, okay, to go the next step up. And to your point, it's really only 2 to 5%. Like that's the icing on the cake is the production. But visually, I think I can go. But
by the way, question to you, is that even like on TikTok, it may work against you. Like I think on Instagram, it'll be additive to your brand because for whatever reason, again, like it goes back to culture of different platforms and expectations from the audience. So I think on YouTube and Instagram, I think that'll be super additive. But I wonder, like on TikTok, as you said, it may actually work against you. Because people love the dude in front of an iPhone just talking with no captions and nothing, you know? So it's like, how are you thinking about that?
Yeah, that's tough. I mean, I'm kind of to the point where I want to feel good about it myself because if I'm a curator of taste, I want to make it taste good, you know, like more or less it's said in a weird way. But like when I look at your stuff visually, I'm like, damn, that production quality is high. When I look at my stuff visually, I'm like, not as high. It could be better. And like, I want it to be better because in my head, it looks better. And if it looks better to me, it'll look better to the 1,000 people that think like me. And I think that's always a good compass to use. But I agree, it's probably not going to work as well on TikTok. But that is a trade-off because I think all you're really doing is crafting taste and crafting aesthetic. That's it. That's at the very simplest level. So if you do that, guided to what your receptors like most, I think you'll win in the long term. That's my thought on that. But I was going to say, I can give my thoughts for you is that your production quality is peak. Like I can't imagine it being better in terms of like, maybe you'll
funny
play with
we're our own greatest critics. Like I'm thinking, man, this needs a lot of improvement, but we're always our greatest critics.
Yeah.
But I appreciate that.
The thing I want to see from you more is what you just dropped yesterday, because if I like analyze your mix of content, you've had some videos that I thought were dope, like very, very cool that weren't the split screen style, but they didn't do that well. They didn't perform as well. And I think it'd be easy even for you in your head to be like, like gun shy to make those because you're like, it's not going to do well. But I think you're kind of like past the point of needing to just siphon, junk audience. Now you're to the point of like, I want to build my vibe as an artist. And so I feel like those are the best way to do it. I like when you do the split screen stuff too, because I think it's really informative, but I really like when you do there was one you did when you guys were in the cabin or something and you had just like amazing image quality and you were just talking about in the cabin. I think it was like sending the DM or something. And even that, like as little as it was, like you could probably have elevated the story quality 5x in the next year, but like going in different scenes and like if you like cinematography, like putting the camera in different places, I think that's sick. Like that there's a huge untapped room for you there. And obviously you can keep doing the split screen and I'll keep doing it. And like I think it's really valuable for us too to become like you know, 2 of the top 5 people that people go to for interesting shit, but the art seems to be in that other format. That's what I would.
And it all goes back to, again, the underlying theme I think of weekends, man, is the artist versus the business person. It's like, how heavily do I want to lean into that at the expense of the other stuff, which I think is more monetizable? You know, it's interesting, right? Like it's this whole dichotomy, and I love exploring it with you. But yeah, I did love doing that, man. Like, they actually re-recorded one of the dialogue scenes for something so small that I wish, but if anybody out there, Instagram product team, I wish they had A/B testing for Reels. You could upload completely different, or like different hooks almost, or like different small things, so you could really test this. Because like I went back, it probably took an hour to go back and re-record these dialogue scenes. I don't know if you noticed in one of the scenes with me as like the more level-headed, thoughtful character versus like the dude with the hat and the chain that was just like, you know, more rambunctious. I actually went back and put a blue light in the room behind me, first to like have the color contrast, you know, like the yellow and the blue, on the color wheel, they contrast nicely together. But also adding that like moonlight behind me, I thought it would just gave like this more romantic element to the scene. To like the words that I was saying were a little bit heavier because it's like subconsciously it's a little later. It's like a moonlit room. It's like this 2 a.m. conversation where the words just hit a little heavier. So like I wonder, like to me that was a big thing because it's like this technique I wanted to employ, and it was important to me. What you said resonates really deeply, where it's like, it's important to me and I'm fulfilled. I'm like, you know, and I think that's, everybody should listen to what you just said a million different times, because that's most important, that's paramount. But I do wonder if there was any, like without that blue light, would it have performed 3% less well, 8%? Is it a wash? Sometimes I wonder like these little things, right? And I don't know, again, just like another little tangent there, but artist versus the business person.
It's impossible to know. But yeah. I will say, to that point about making it for you, it seems like with content and with most things, the majority of the gains come from like one piece. Like you make 300 pieces and like one piece is the thing that really steps you up. And if you're not making stuff for you and you're not in a place mentally where you're willing to take the swing, like you're willing to reach higher, you won't end up making that one thing. Like it's rare that the one that pops is the same ordinary shit that you make every day. It's like, it's going to be something you really reached for. And the reason you reached is because you were in the pocket, like we said last time. And you were in the pocket because you're making stuff for you and you feel good about it. That's key. So yeah, I mean, and then there's always a devil's advocate, because it's like, oh, I made stuff for me and I made 100 videos and like they didn't go anywhere. And like, this could be a really weird person and nobody resonates. But like at the end of the day, I just think if you make stuff that you like, and you're curating that taste, you're really like sharpening the arrow of what's cool to you, I think it'll work out if you with a long enough time horizon.
I think that's super important for people to hear, man. I completely agree. I see behind you my beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, right? I think it's the best album of all time. I was listening to Kanye perform Runaway in Sydney like 2014. It's on YouTube, and he went on this like rant we were talking about before the show, and he said something where he was like almost in tears saying it. I could see how passionate he was about it, but he's like, I have a responsibility to imitate and not imitate. Like he's always trying to push the bar. And yeah, I like one thing that I'm very fearful of in terms of content is audience fatigue. I'm reverse engineering here, me as a consumer and a fan of creators and this and that. Like I have some creators that I've followed since like 2015 that have been posting the same sunset photo for 8 years now. And it's just like, my brain is now trained. Like, hey, I respect the guy. This is not like a slight. This is not like me not appreciating his work, but I'm just like, like your brain gets trained. There's like audiences change, people's interests change, as fatigue sets in. And so like, I'm always worried about, and we talked about this before. Mr. Beast said this one time when he did a format that was working so well, where he'd go on Twitch and he'd donate a lot of money to creators that have like 0 or 1 viewer. And he did like 18 of those, and they were just like popping. And he's like, he abandoned that because he wanted to, like, he was scared it would get like stale. He's like, no, I got to keep pushing the envelope. Like, I don't want to just rely on, I don't know, man. It's something that I think about a lot. And for whatever reason, I'm very fearful of doing the same thing over and over again forever, and like just people, you know, and just it's the same shit as all. I don't know.
Well, I think most people take the lazy path, which the lazy path is imitation, and they take that path because they just want to do less work. Like if you want to win small, you can do it with imitation. But if you want to win big, you have to push the envelope. You just have to. Like that's the only way to do it.
Golden quote, man. Somebody clip that. Yes.
We got to clip that up.
I agree.
Get our Andrew Tate army on that stat. Wait, one question I had for you though. So I'm thinking about YouTube, like normal YouTube stuff. So like we'll have the pod, and like eventually the pod will get on its own channel and we'll grow that separately. But like when it comes to our own channels and like putting out YouTube content, I feel like, as we've talked about, we've got a bunch of interesting novel formats with shorts, which are cool. And we can keep running that and keep innovating that. I think like we have a good lens for that. When it comes to YouTube, like horizontal content, I do think that's where you build more trust. I have no experience doing that really. And in terms of like on YouTube, but I have two formats that I want to get your take on that I'm going to experiment with. The problem is I'll either need an editor or like have to just like struggle through the first 10 to like build my skills up. But one is I want to take Blueprint and translate it to video. So like, what would that look like? So basically with the Blueprint newsletter, if you don't read it and you're listening, you should definitely subscribe to it. We'll link it down below. It's basically, I think it's the only thing of its kind on the internet, which is basically me writing a super raw, transparent, like behind the scenes look into what it's like to be a creator. So like if you imagine Roberto or my week and the thoughts that come up and like these different little like nuggets that we think about and whatever, and the videos we make. So I kind of try to like summarize that written every single week. Now I'm thinking like, okay, can I do that? But can I also create like a video component somehow? So like vlog style, but maybe, less like, oh, I'm going out to get a coffee, and more like, hey, I just had this thought and like it's a 30-second rant. And it's basically like me working out the bits that would end up being refined and written in Blueprint, but I'm trying to catch the vibe raw, like really raw. So I have this vision of like doing that and eventually 5 years from now, when we have a team and we have physical facilities and we're like dope, someone will be filming that for me and editing it. But like, what would the version of that, which is what you only see on YouTube, look like initially, in the rawest stage? So I'm trying to workshop that. What do you think would work with that type of format?
Well, first of all, highly recommend Blueprint. I think it's my favorite newsletter. Speaking of newsletter, let's hammer that in episode 5. I think newsletters is the biggest bubble. Every single entrepreneur product, everybody I've ever talked to, newsletter ads are always the lowest performing, horrible ROI. And so like newsletter for your own brand is super important. And Kallaway, there's nobody doing it better. So everybody, if you're listening to this and you're not subscribed to Blueprint, go subscribe to that. 2 thoughts. One, first, Dan Coe, this is his whole thing. He writes a newsletter and then he reads that newsletter on YouTube, very minimal editing, and then he repurposes that into different formats across all platforms. I think you should do the same thing, where you're really just reading that newsletter, and the images that you're adding to the newsletter, you could have just like talk show style, Bill Maher style, where you're just talking, just read off a teleprompter and then have images to the left or to the right of you. I think you should just do that. I think that won't be a big time constraint for you. And then every newsletter, you have the video version at the top.
Is that all he does is just read? He just straight reads it?
He just reads his newsletter, yeah.
Oh, wow.
Off his iPhone. Yeah, he showed like his process. And it's a brilliant because his main body of work is that newsletter. Is that beautifully written, like eloquent, 3-page thought dump or whatever. Then he just reads it on YouTube, very minimal editing, and then it becomes a series of tweets, an Instagram carousel, an animated, like his team will animate the central idea. And I think it's dope, and I think you should just do the same thing with Blueprint. I don't think you need to be thinking of like this highly edited, stylized thing. And the reason why is like, one thing that I've been thinking a lot about is storytelling. I really do think it's like the skill to learn for anybody, like the most impactful skill you can learn as a business person, as an artist, whatever it might be. And I've also like realized it's like, why do we love stories is because we can see ourselves in them. And so people actually don't care about your story or my story. They only care if they can see themselves in it. Like they see themselves as the main character. And so like Blueprint, it's such an impactful story because as I'm reading it, I'm relating so much. And I know a lot of other creators out there are also relating and can see themselves in your story. And I think that is so impactful. And so reading it just out loud audibly with minimal editing is totally fine because nobody's watching it let me look at some cool new editing styles. Like, yo, I want to get this story straight from the source, told in such a dope way. I would just read it straight up with like some visuals to add it. And I think most people will listen to it while working out. And to end that thought, that's what I love about YouTube. It's like a lot of what I consume now is in the background. It's in another tab. It's comfort viewing. It's just like in the back. You know what I mean? Like there's not a lot of YouTube that I sit down and watch. It's always in another tab. And I love that about YouTube.
Yeah, I should definitely experiment with that. I was thinking today, this came into my head.
Dude, it's a podcast. It's another podcast for you.
Yeah.
You're right? But it's scripted. It's dope. But I think you should do that. I love that.
Have you seen Jesse from Nelk and now Sunday? Have you seen those things he makes like every week?
I don't. I last time I really watched him was like Nelk, but I saw your video on him. I wanna like catch up. I wanna watch some of his stuff.
You should watch these because in my head, I'm definitely gonna experiment with the format you said, which is basically like reading the newsletter more or less with like some visuals. What he does is, and the reason this idea came to me is like a combination of him and actually Callum, who we talked about already. He put out episode 1 of his kind of like behind the build thing, which is similar to what I'm saying. So you should definitely watch both of those and see what you think about them. Callum's is more raw, and it's like him. It's basically like one A-roll shot of him being kind of like interviewed by the cameraman, and then it cuts to a bunch of other scenes with him like, you know, like he'll set up a phone on the tripod in the podcast, and like it's not going to show you the full podcast, but like he'll say, all right, clap, we're done. And like you see the behind the scenes, or like he'll be in his room and he'll turn on the camera and he's like, dude, like this isn't working. Like, I don't know why it's not, like, it's really raw. And I really like how it teleported me into the moment for him of this journey. I love that. Now Jesse's is more highly produced and sick. It's one of the coolest things on YouTube. It's basically like, as he was building Sunday, which for those who don't know, he basically sold his equity in Nelk, got a shit ton of money, probably 10 to 20 million. And he bought this like warehouse in LA that he painted completely white. And then Sunday has this like green color, and there's like a bunch of green stuff in there. And it's him and like his 5 to 10 employees, which are also like his boys. And they're basically building both a creative studio and their own brand. And there's this guy who has a camera who basically follows him and the boys around. And each episode's like 8 to 10 minutes. And it's got like 4 or 5 different kind of scenes in it. And it's just like, oh, if they're having a meeting with someone cool, like he's filming Jesse, he's filming it's like pretty raw handheld, but like dope. And it looks cool because the whole background is like all white with like these green pops, and it'll show them like, you know, training like MMA or boxing for one scene, or like his dad will come in. It's sick. So with that, like that's my vision. I really want one of those.
Something to work towards though.
Yeah,
you know?
towards,
like,
yeah,
as
exactly.
You put the team together, yeah.
Exactly. I can't do that now, and especially handheld, it won't look the same, but I think that it's just so cool to be able to document the process, like we're saying, is because people want to see themselves as the hero, and you're just a vehicle to show them the mirror. Like that's really all it is.
100%, man. And that's why I want to like tell my story more. I want to make the point like I really, really want to succeed just to be able to tell the story. If like I'm kind of dumb, man, if I can do it, you can do it, right? Like I want to like you said, be a vessel for that story to be told. But yeah, man, I think you should do that. I would listen to it like religiously. You know, it's like, think of it as an audio book, right, for the podcast. I love even funny enough, like Johnny Harris. I don't know if you know him on YouTube.
Is that Johnny FPV?
No, I think his name's Johnny Harris. He's like a brilliant storyteller, man. And he's got like a whole team now, but the way he like tells these stories, yeah, Johnny Harris, 4.6 million subs. Random stuff, right? Like almost like a video investigative journalist. He has his latest videos, why people think the government killed JFK, you know, why everybody's mad about China's new map, how Facebook became a tool for genocide, the moon landing hoax explained. So it's like, it has like geopolitical undertones, but the way he tells his stories and the way that they're edited are fucking marvelous, man. I think the best maybe in like the world at this. But funny enough, I just listened to it in a different tab because I just want the information. I want his take on things like, oh, the moon landing hoax explained. I do want to know why people think it's a hoax and why people are debunking it. And I find myself like laughing at that I'm listening to this it's probably like a $200,000 production, and I'm listening to it in another tab, just listening, not even watching. But it goes to my point. It's like, this is why I think Raw is making a comeback. People are fixated on Sam Sulek not having any production value and just being raw. I think that's the wrong way to look at it. I just think it's on another tab, man, or it's just in the background, or it's on the TV as you're working on your computer. Nobody's sitting down and watching for 2 hours on a couch. This is all back, like, and that's what the missing component, I think, what people are missing about YouTube. And that's why I'm like, go all in and just make it raw, because it's still so consumable, you know, because again, like, I don't think anybody's going to sit down and like watch. Everybody's listening to the shit in the background or a different tab, Dan Co, etc. So
that's a really interesting insight. And like something I had never thought about before is like YouTube is marketed as the visual medium, but in reality, it's just the podcast player that everybody uses, more or less.
Dude,
right?
Nobody is sitting down and watching 2 hours of Samsung. I don't buy that. Like nobody, you know, it's like it's in the background and it's on you know, your second monitor, or it's on your phone as you're gaming.
Yeah.
This is the way people are wired now. So I don't so that's why I put a lot of emphasis into like this new raw emergence. Cuz it's beautiful. Like it's like you know, in your lonely hour as you're just sitting there grinding or working or feeling anxious or whatever, it's like in the background and it's almost like comforting.
Damn, that's sick. I mean, that's something I'd never thought about before. That makes a lot of sense though, and like completely changes my like mental approach for YouTube, because now it's more like, what is the content? What is the story? Is the audio good? And like the video is what it is, you know, like more or less.
Well, let me ask you a question. Your favorite podcast, do you sit down on a couch, turn them on and just watch them and not look at your phone and not, you know, no, right? I would imagine.
Yeah, no, I don't watch any.
Something.
Yeah. I don't watch really anything on YouTube.
Yeah. And so I think lean into that, you know, with like the Blueprint video format.
What's interesting too is like those Sunday videos. I would say like in my head, those are the best videos on YouTube, but I don't avoid watching them because I have to watch them, but like I almost can't find 10 minutes to sit down and watch it. And it doesn't listen well as like a podcast. So I don't really consume it, you know? Like I had a period where I was watching them religiously, but I would just, when I was eating lunch, I'd put it up, and that's the only time when I could find the 10 minutes. So that is really interesting for people listening. Damn, I had one
audio is such an important format for me, because when you're, dude, like yesterday I was listening to this Erwin McManus podcast on Think Media. He was talking about storytelling. I thought it was fascinating. But I was actually playing like the new Modern Warfare 3 multiplayer. I don't ever have like the head audio of the game on. I have like a podcast on and I'm just like kind of doing it but like, it's the same as when you're doodling in school and the teacher is like going on about something. It's like that information, I don't know the science or the psychology behind it, but it's like, it's like, have you ever, like, do you know what I'm talking about? Where like, you soak it in so heavily.
The reason
you're so
why
focused on it.
There's like a neuroscience reason why. I think it's because basically when you can occupy the subconscious mind with like meaningless stuff, that's why like when you're driving, you can really dial into what's being said, because your subconscious mind is kind of like going, like, you know, like you're not gonna get in an accident, but you know you have to stay in the lanes, but you can like, you're keeping that like anxiousness just quiet enough so that you can key in on whatever you really want to key in on. So I think that is how it works. So that's why people like when they're in the shower, they come up with great ideas, because like what you're doing in the shower, running, driving, it's the same thing with like when you're playing video games, same thing. Those are the best places to come up with ideas, because your mind is perfectly stimulated at the subconscious level, and then your active mind can like, you know, wander freely. So that's dope,
I recently just started like running, and like I've become addicted, and I've realized why. It's not like the physical benefits, not even like the mental benefit, like the endorphins, It's actually where I do my best ideation.
Yeah.
And I think it goes to what you're saying, right? It's like you're, or lifting weights. I love that too, because you're so consumed with like, you know, the 200-pound bar that you have in front of you that you're not preoccupied with all like these anxious thoughts and your mind racing or whatever it is. So that's interesting, man. That's really, really interesting feedback. But it goes to my earlier point, audio version of, or video version of Blueprint. Let's go.
So one idea too is like, which is funny. Like if you really think about it, if you pull out, it's basically like you just want to hear the perspective from the person you trust on a bunch of shit. That's like what it really comes down to. And so at the farthest level down the like automation spectrum is the reality, like we have a physical space, and like all day we're just like giving our takes and reacting to shit, and then you have a full team that's just like packaging that up in different ways. And if you do that, you're everywhere. I kind of think that's what maybe that's not like great for art, but like if you're looking for just output, that I guess is what Hormozy does, right? That's what people like him who put out 50 pieces a week.
That's like the pinnacle, man, where you are the content. You're not making content, you just are the content.
Yeah, you're just giving takes all day long.
And you just have a very creative team that understands, again, social. Gary Vee calls it PAC, platforms and culture, who understands, oh shit, that's dope. Gary just said that's dope. I remember, okay, they're also like stewards of your content bank. So I remember 3 years ago, he said something like that. Let's make a piece of content that connects that. Like, okay, he was a little bit of a visionary. 3 years ago, he said it, he's saying it again, but now it's coming to life. Like, he has such a smart team that understands social and understands himself. And that's the ultimate, like, you know, that's kind of the, that I think everybody can work towards, you know, where you have that creative team. It's very, very difficult to do, but that's like almost end game where you are the content. It's magical.
That goes back to the COO character like that we're looking for. It's the same thing. It's like, we just need that. Okay. So let's do one or two more things. We can either do, I don't know if do you hear me talk about creators in residence on the podcast with Callum? That's one idea. I've got another idea for you called build alongs. I want to hear your thoughts on, or we could talk about the video agency stuff we were texting about. Either
let's do video agency for next one. Cause I usually have like a 2-hour hard stop here for fatherhood purposes.
Okay. Sorry.
But I do want to hear, well, first of all, I don't know if are there any creators? Like I'd really love a section where we're shouting out like some of our favorite creators who are doing something like very novel or just, you know, something that inspires us. I don't know if you have any that come to mind.
Well, Callum for one just recently popped off. We've mentioned him a couple times. Yep. I would check out his podcast, Callum Johnson Show. I think he is one of the examples of like his quality and output far surpassed the results, and now is just like starting to catch up. Like I think he had one video go viral the last couple of weeks, and like he's ripping now. So he's one that you should definitely, if you like interviews with interesting people, but like not in a stale way, I would check him out for sure. Let me pull up my Instagram. I think this guy Renz, what's his last name? You've probably seen him before. He makes a lot of like the iPhone content. Let's see, Renz.
Yeah, I follow him. I know who you're talking about.
He's really, really good at like tech gear reviews or like iPhone apps. Renz Sadiwa, RENZ SADIWA. Like if you're interested in gear and like tech, I would follow him. He's sick.
Yeah,
I think his
it's
really
funny
cool.
how you're doing that because like it's a branding problem, right? So this is one thing about me. Like one of the things I hate about my brand, so to speak, is RP Nixon. It's very hard. It's have you seen like it's like RPN, RP Nick? People are always like calling me Nick. Like I wish I had like a Gary V. Like I wish I had and so like Renz is the same thing. I think it's his name, but I've mentioned him to people before, and I'm like, it's like a Ren, it's like a Renza. Like
yeah,
it's
that's why I'm trying to go with Kallaway. I'm trying to get that Oprah effect. Just one word.
I want just
one
RPN.
Name.
I want just RPN. I feel like that.
Who has that really handle?
It's like a throwaway, but I'm gonna work on that, man. I'm gonna work on that.
Yeah. Who else comes to mind in terms of creators that you're seeing that are?
I have two that I had written down that I want to like really shout out that I'm inspired by, and very, very different on extreme ends of the spectrum creators. One is Hallie Tut on Instagram. I'm just like so inspired by her creativity, and like the stuff that she makes is just such a breath of fresh air. I personally haven't seen anything like it, where it's like she's infusing again like these like beautiful storytelling paradigms with just crazy visuals. Like the level of talent and the level of time that go into like these productions, I want to call them, is very admirable. So I wanted to shout out Hallie Tut. I think she's a must follow for anybody. And then the other one is George Mack on Twitter. I don't know if you've seen George Mack. He's like one of the 4 people that I have notifications on Twitter, and it's like the way that he thinks and the insight that he provides. I just think I love the way that this dude's brain works. And I also think he's a must follow. So I wanted to shout out both George Mack and Hallie Tut.
George Mack's a bucket for content. You know, like in basketball, how someone's good, you're like, they're a bucket. He's a bucket. Every time he posts something, it's just straight gold. He's amazing.
And actually, I think like if a video creator would just like repurpose his ideas into video, they would crush, man. And like, I don't know if like George has ever thought about doing video, but if he did like a video format of his ideas, man, I'd subscribe to that in a second.
So that's one of the things I was saying in Blueprint this week was this thing transpositioning. Like I didn't invent that word, but transpose is like to take something from one place, use it in another. There is so much opportunity to take Twitter. You can say Twitter, Reddit, LinkedIn, but let's just say Twitter information that's oversaturated on Twitter and make visuals, videos for Instagram, TikTok. I mean, that's basically what we do, right? We scroll Twitter 100%. All day, see interesting shit, and then post it in Reels. Most people don't do that because the people on Twitter who are good writers don't have the personality or don't want to make videos. So there's a huge gap. So that's why I think a huge
opportunity, man. Because Greg Eisenberg said something that I agree with. It's like when you think of like the trust tiers, it's like writing, or like maybe writing is probably at the bottom, and then it's like audio, and then it's video, and then it's streaming. I think streaming is like the ultimate. That's why we see streamers have like the most cult fandom, and like they can like I Show Speed or Kai Cenat can literally be like, hey guys, go buy this, and it'll sell out anything. Doesn't matter what. Like the level of trust and fandom. But so it's interesting. So I see a lot of these writers, and I'm like, man, if they were repurposing their content in a visual format, it would go a long way for them.
It would go crazy. Maybe we can end with, because I know you got to go soon. Maybe we can end with the Q&A section. So I posted that story around, we're going to start doing a Q&A where if you're a creator, we'll set up an inbox for now. You could just like DM us, or we'll put a story out with like a little Instagram question thing. But if you're a creator and you have a question about either of our processes or journeys, or you just want to like ask for advice from yourself, you can dump that in. We'll do a question or two each episode. So I'm looking at the questions that I have right now. Okay, this person said, I have a big question about taste. Can I DM it to you? That we're gonna have to save that one for next time. Let's see. What are the must-have AI platforms for accounting virtual services performed through website? Are you still there?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. That's, yeah. Well, I'll have to set up this question thing more in depth before the next one. But one person is just like talk more about the podcast and like, explain the background. We did that a little bit earlier. Where do you guys go to learn so much about editing and do those crazy effects? So I guess maybe that's a good one of like, where do you think you learned the most? Was it just YouTube over time?
Yeah, I mean, it goes to anything, like whether it be design or whether it be photography, videography, editing, whatever it is. It's always just like you learn by doing, not by reading how to do it or by listening. You learn by doing. And what I've noticed is like any piece of content or anything, or if it was like an interface I was designing, or if it was like a graphic that I was putting together, it's like when you need to learn something, then you learn it. And like that just rinse and repeat compounds over time. So like in editing, as an example, I don't know, I was going to light that dialogue scene. So I went specifically looking how to light a dialogue scene. There's like little things that I picked up here and there that I like put into practice. And so just learning by doing over time, it's like you just become really, really accomplished. Like with Photoshop, this is one of the ways that like I feel like Photoshop was like a third arm of mine. I just knew it's everything so intimately. And it was just 10 years of doing, and everything I needed to learn. Every time I needed to learn how to do something, I would pick up that technique, isolated as a YouTube video, and then I had it in my arsenal. And I think over time that just compounds. And so I don't know what advice I'd give if somebody's just like, how do I learn how to edit? It's just, man, just learn what you need, that particular technique for that particular thing that you need to get done. And then over time, you just keep expanding on that.
Yeah, I would say same thing. And one technique which I haven't used but like would work, there's this thing called a copy work, which is when you're trying to learn how to write, you get a book or like a piece from someone who's dope that you follow, and you literally hand write their exact words. You just write it over and over. So like copying a book is insane, but like copying a chapter. And by doing that, you're like training your brain pathways to think and pace the rhythm the way they think, and like, et cetera. So I think you could probably do that for video as well. Like pick a creator that you like on YouTube, find like a 5-minute video that they made, and try to replicate it as much as you can. And like when you get to an effect or a style or an edit that you don't know how to do, search that in YouTube. Just be like, how do you zoom in smoothly from full screen to whatever? And there's going to be somebody who showed you how to do it. And that'll take a long time to put that together. It'll probably take you a week to like make that. But by doing that, it's like a way to force a project. Like if you don't have a project of yours that you want to do, that's copying someone else's for practice is like a good way.
I love that. Yeah, I stamp that, man. That's well
Dope.
said.
All right, I think that's the pod. We have a lot of hitters left for next week, so make sure you guys come back for that. Subscribe on YouTube and share this with a friend. Like if you're a creator and you're listening to this point, I know you've gotten value. So share it with a friend, share it with another creator, and we'll be here for hopefully hundreds more episodes.
Yeah, man, definitely appreciate that. And yeah, excited for episode 5 because there are a lot of things to cover. Man, we'll see. I'm gonna have to figure out a situation where I can do like 3 hours, man, because I think it's what it's gonna take. I'm also excited with these episodes. It's like what I love about podcasts, especially with timestamps now on YouTube, is you can kind of consume it a la carte. And I love that as well. I think we're covering such a variety of different things that, you know, if somebody may not have 2 hours to listen to the whole thing, you know, hopefully you do. But if you don't, you can kind of check out the timestamps and see what is most important or impactful or interesting to you. And I love that about the show that we're doing as well. You know, it's easily clipped. So maybe for the tape model, that'd be super dope. But yeah, just appreciate anybody listening and excited to continue.
Hell yeah. Peace. See you guys next time.